Welcome to For You Radio, where the gospel's for the believer and the unbeliever alike. That is you. Jesus Christ died for you. You're going to have to deal with that sooner or later. You may as well just accept it as a fact now, because it's going to be a fact no matter what. I'm Craig D'Onofrio, pastor of Redeemer Lutheran Church in Wilmer, Minnesota. Don't you know? Who are you?
That brings up a great question, Craig.
Yep.
When we say God loves you, is that Minnesota nice?
Oh,
or is it genuine? Like
no, it's the real. It is beyond any dispute. So yes.
By the way, having grown up in the Midwest, Nebraska, there's no harm in being polite. This is what we tend to think. But
right, polite is nice, but polite isn't always kind. Yeah. Think about that.
Okay. Anyway, I am Troy Neer, pastor of St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Shaker Heights, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland, in case you were wondering.
This is true. A place where I once served also, not Shaker Heights, but Cleveland.
Not Shaker Heights and not St. Peter's, no. But
Cleveland.
In the land of Cleve.
Yes. By the way, there is a new movie out about Cleveland. If you haven't seen it, Troy, you should check it out. It's called Lost and Found in Cleveland, and we saw it in St. Cloud, Minnesota. But fun movie. A lot of inside baseball in Cleveland. Hey, you can check us out check out 1517.org. Lots of great resources there. Troy, if people want to email us, that's the word I'm trying to use, what would be the proper address to use, sir?
Again, changes are a-coming, but for right now, please still do use For You Radio at 1517.org.
Yes. So we're going to jump right in because time is of the essence, and we do not want to waste any time because we have a special guest with us today, Katie Coblintz, who is a vicar's wife. As a matter of fact, there's one for you right there. That I don't think you're the first vicar's wife we've ever had. We've had vicars, but no vicar's wives. Katie
have we defined vicar, by the way, before? What if our British friends are listening? They'll go
one who acts vicariously. In this case,
in our setting, it's an intern. It's a
interning pastor, one who's interning toward the pastorate. How's that?
Sorry to interrupt. But go ahead.
Katie has a really unique story and one that is truly astonishing and glorifying to God. And we aren't going to take a whole lot of time doing a big intro because I just kind of want to let Katie start talking about her life. It may be a little surprising to you, but Katie has had a very, very fascinating life with many twists and turns. Katie, I'm just going to throw it at you and ask you to tell us your story for about 5 or 10 minutes, if you would.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds great.
Why are you here? Right, yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, hello, everybody. So I'm Katie, and the very interesting life that we're talking about is that I'm what's known as a detransitioner, and that is just a big fancy word. All it means is that at one point in my life, I identified as transgender, and now I no longer do. But during the time, it was a period of about 7 years, from the time I was 18 to we'll say 25-ish, 18-ish to 25-ish. I took testosterone. I had a double mastectomy, which is known as top surgery, and I had a full hysterectomy. So when I was just a little girl growing up, I'm biologically female. I was perfectly healthy. Everything was normal, but I was a bit of a tomboy. And then during my teenage years, adolescence, and then all through my teenage years, puberty was so awkward, as it is for everybody, but at the time I didn't realize that. I thought that must mean that something's not right with me. This is just over the top. When I was 18, I watched a lot of YouTube, and I settled on the transgender identity. And the reason I settled on it was just that all of the other influencers who felt the way I did also settled on that transgender identity. And I saw them going through these changes and going through what they call a medical transition, which is usually it involves taking hormones, having surgeries, changing your name, using different pronouns. And so I wanted to start doing that. When I was 18, almost 19, I started that. I went to the gender clinic near my house. I'm from Massachusetts. I went to Boston's gender clinic to do it. Got started on testosterone right away. a year later, I had my first surgery, which was a double mastectomy to remove my breasts. And 4 years after that surgery, I had a complete hysterectomy to remove my uterus, cervix, fallopian tubes, and both ovaries. And during that surgery, actually, this is a little fun fact about me. During that surgery, something went wrong. I don't know exactly what went wrong, but they cut open one of my arteries and then didn't close it back up. So when I came out of the surgery, I was actually bleeding internally for hours. I needed 3 blood transfusions. They found their error because I was losing consciousness on the bed. And no, they found their error, brought me back for emergency surgery and fixed everything, gave me my blood transfusions, and I was good to go. I mean, this was a surgery done in, the summer of 2020 for transgender purposes that I just had no reason getting. And it almost killed me.
I got to say, Katie, I don't know if that counts as fun fact.
I don't know. It wasn't that much fun at the time, but sometimes I say it and people are like, oh my goodness, tell me more. So,
oh my, yeah.
I don't know. It must be interesting if everybody wants to hear about it.
That hysterectomy, I've heard your story before, but that hysterectomy wasn't it because you had been on high doses of testosterone and it kind of wrecked you?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. All the testosterone had started to, I think, cause, I don't know all the medical terms, but basically around my uterus, any muscles or tendons, those were weakened and they were just yanking on my uterus and causing me a lot of pain. So I went to the gender clinic because I said, hey, I'm having a lot of abdominal pain and I have no idea why. And they told me, oh, this is what it must be. Every person, if they've taken testosterone for a long, or every woman who takes testosterone like this, basically transgender identified people, they eventually have to have a hysterectomy. And so I just saw that as the next step. Like, okay, everybody has to do this because I'm having these serious complications. But at no point did they say, it's the testosterone, stop the testosterone, it's wreaking havoc on you internally. Oh. So I just went ahead with the hysterectomy. And to be fair, if somebody had said, hey, Katie, you can just stop the testosterone, I still may have not done that. Just because I was so stuck in that transgender identity.
I want to back up a little bit to your adolescence. And you were saying you were kind of a tomboy, and a lot of girls are tomboys. How much of this do you think was, you say you're watching a lot of YouTube, how much of this do you think was really driven by indoctrination through social media and that sort of thing?
I think it was all driven by that. When I actually settled on the transgender identity, the thing about being a tomboy is I already felt different from other peers, but when I got to high school, I thought, okay, I can identify as a lesbian, and that was very, very common at my school. I started high school in 2010, so a lot of people are starting to identify as gay. The teachers have the equal rights stickers from the human rights campaigns hung up on their door so that you know it's a safe place if you identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual. There wasn't a lot of talk about transgenderism when I was in high school, but I already put myself on that LGBT identity alphabet. I don't know what you want to call it, but I was already part of the acronym. But it wasn't until I got on YouTube and I started searching for this stuff and watching so many of these influencers say, well, I identify as a lesbian and I feel horrible in my body. They're the ones saying puberty was awkward and I was a tomboy growing up. But I really was a tomboy. It's just all these things I looked back on and I thought, well, these are all signs of my real identity, which is a boy. I identify as a boy. I'm transgender. That's my true identity. So I think it was all social media.
Really? Okay. And just YouTube or other avenues of social media kind of reinforce that as well?
For me personally, it was just YouTube. I didn't really have much to do with any other ones, but I know that it was popular on a lot of other ones. There's, people will talk about Instagram. I think Tumblr's a big one. But for me, it was mostly just YouTube.
Do you think that, and I know one of the things I really love about you, Katie, and your story is that I've seen you on a couple of different Lila Rose and some other stuff, but one of the things that I really admire about you is you don't really seem to be looking to assign blame at others, and you've accepted a lot of responsibility for what you did. But do you feel that perhaps you and others are being groomed by the public schools with all of this such rampant, more than acceptance? I mean, it seems like the teachers, in many cases, are trying to affirm you even before you know what's going on. And so, did you feel like you were being pushed in a certain direction or anything?
I'm actually really happy that you brought that up. So I think there was a little bit of a push, and I think that there is more now than there was when I was in high school. And I did take a lot of the responsibility because some of it's my responsibility to take. I mean, some of it is just the doctors shouldn't be able to carve people up, and the public school teacher shouldn't be able to teach people falsehoods. But a lot of it is on me. I was the one who went out and chose to do this. I was the one. So I did take a lot of that responsibility onto myself. But the push by other people is so important, because now it's not just people going into high school and seeing the equal rights stickers. It's middle schools and sometimes younger having the pride flag up. So there is definitely a lot of grooming that's going on. Now, if we talk about just my story personally, I can't really speak to the pride flags in elementary schools because it wasn't a thing. But I think it's really important to bring it up because, yes, there's a lot of grooming, and it just is. I guess it's almost like children are put on this assembly line where we start them young and we start teaching them, we start planting the seeds of transgenderism when they're really young, but they can't quite grasp it. And then by middle school, we're telling them you need to break free of your actual vocations. You're not just a daughter or a son or a brother or a sister. You actually could be other than that. You don't have to be a nephew. You could be a niece, that sort of thing, where they're telling you your vocations, the things that God gives you, those are not gifts anymore. Those are constraints. And then by the time you get to high school and you're exposed to social media and the teachers are just full on talking about it, it's like you've been pushed down this assembly line. So, okay, now we can take this to its conclusion and you will start your transition. Or sometimes they start transition earlier. So there's absolutely grooming going on. I'm glad that you brought that up.
So many fascinating things in that. One, man, that is such a powerful statement that turning away from our God-given vocations and viewing those as constraints, I think that's just a powerful thing. And I'm just thinking of all the different times in our lives where we felt awkward or out of place or felt I don't really belong here. And yet the Lord was still using us in some way to bring blessing to others. And so you didn't have that sort of sense, right? You just felt awkward and again, just, hey, I don't belong here. And there's no one to tell you otherwise. That's
right. When I was feeling awkward in my identity, and I mean, what teenager doesn't? But by the time I was 18, I could act on it. I'm thinking, okay, I'm feeling this uncomfortable, so I need to do something about it. And it wasn't, hey, you're just supposed to be uncomfortable for a little while, but this is what God says about you, and God is not wrong about that. Instead, and I mean, nobody was really telling me that. Nobody knew to tell me that. But instead it was, oh, you're feeling uncomfortable. Well, that's something that you can control. So instead of looking at who you are, how you're defined by the people around you and your relationships, dig deep inside yourself and decide for yourself how you identify, and that will take away some of that awkwardness.
So to that end, so we've used the word grooming a couple of times, and I think typically in conservative circles anyway, grooming takes on like a really wicked and deliberately wicked context. But when you mention safe spaces, I mean, I know there's got to be people who are sincere about this, right? That they really do want to help, but they don't have any better answers. Would you say, is that true of some people, or is this a truly wicked thing? Are people just sincere, or are they evil?
I would say that some people are actually sincere. Probably a lot of people are, and they just don't know better. I'd be a little slower to just attribute everything to malice. I think people actually just don't know. People don't have a good moral framework. They might not have a particularly religious or Christian upbringing. And so they may just not know that God has already made you and defined you, and that's what you need is, your identity as a baptized child of God, and
Yeah.
that's all you need. And a lot of people, they don't know it. So yes, grooming does take on it has a very negative connotation, and I do use it because I think that a lot of what's going on is grooming, but maybe an individual teacher doesn't know better and says, oh, you can talk to me about this, and then says, listen, it's okay the way that you're feeling. I don't think that teacher or teachers in that position are trying to lead children astray.
Yeah, it's interesting because
I don't think that that's what they're setting out to do.
it seems that they're being, for lack of a better phrase, groomed also, probably in the university system, being told this is important that kids can embrace this. And so they're being taught stuff that then they're carrying on. And of course, it just perpetuates itself. You lived successfully as a man for how long?
7 years.
And you were convincing from what you say. People thought you were a dude.
Yeah, the reason, so a lot of people will say, I could tell when a person's transgender, and you could probably tell. But people weren't necessarily looking for it with me. But I would tell some of my friends, I would quote unquote come out of the closet to some of my friends, and I would say, hey, just so you know, I'm not actually a man, I'm a woman, like I'm transgender. And they would think I was telling some offensive joke, which was, and still is, it is definitely in my nature to do those things. But it's not what I was doing in that moment. And people really, truly did not believe me when I would try to tell them.
That's wild. That is really wild. Troy, you got something there?
Well, yeah. So you said lived successfully as a man for 7 years, and yet you are no longer doing that. So I guess a couple questions. I mean, were you happy and content? Did that give you some of the answers you wanted? And apparently not. So what's the thing that convinced you otherwise?
So I would have told you during those 7 years, at any point in those 7 years, that I was happy and content. That this was a good idea, that this is exactly what I was supposed to do. And that's 7 years later. So when people say, well, I asked somebody, they've been transitioning for a couple of years and they're sure of their decision, they say they're happier, more content. Yeah, sure, they can say that, but it's not true. Because every time they look in the mirror, they still see something that they want to change about themselves. They still see something that makes them uncomfortable. Now, what it was for me was God, I guess. What else would it have been to turn me away from that lifestyle? But I was so stubborn. So after the hysterectomy, I was not scared away from being transgender. I bled out and everything. I just said, well, all right, that's fine. I'm done with surgeries anyway. No need to scare my family into wondering if I'm going to survive another surgery. What got me was I went for my regular haircut appointment at a great barber shop with a barber who I love and I still will visit sometimes if I ever make my way back to New Hampshire. I got my normal haircut. It was a men's haircut, shorter on the sides, longer on the top. Same thing I've been getting every single month for however many years I've been there. And I went home, wanted to take a shower, get the hairs off my neck. Because, when you get a haircut, you get all those itchy hairs. And then I was going to get ready to go and work the night shift. I worked the night shift back then. Well, I went home and I looked in the mirror before I was going to take a shower. I'm looking at my face and I'm just thinking, no, wait, something's not right. I finally saw myself as a woman in that moment. First time in my adult life. I've been doing this since I was 18. And I thought, and at this point, maybe I'm 25, 26, something like that. And I'm looking at myself and I just keep thinking, no, this can't be right. This can't be right. So I just try to stop thinking whatever I'm thinking. I stop looking in the mirror. I clean off the back of my neck. I wash my hair, all that stuff, get ready to go for work. And I look in the mirror again. And again, I can only see myself as a woman. And I was crying. I couldn't stop myself from seeing myself as a woman. And I'm thinking, on top of all these changes I've made to myself that I'm now in this moment for the first time ever regretting, I have a men's haircut on top of it. And a nice, fresh men's haircut, too. It was a good one. And I just felt so dumb. And I needed to just kind of collect myself and go to work, which I could because I was taking testosterone. So if I needed to stop crying, I could just stop. If I needed to just allocate 10 minutes to being sad, I could do that. I can't do that anymore, but I could back then. So I stopped myself from crying. I went to work, and I just pretended that everything was fine. But eventually, it kind of just fell apart on me, and I felt like I had nothing. So I'm grasping for anything. I'm like, what makes me me? What makes me me? And the only thing that I could come up with, the only thing I needed, was the only thing I had left, was my baptismal identity.
As you were going through all this, was there anything spiritual going on in your life that was kind of calling you to that identity? Were you involved in Christianity at all, or was there any word and sacrament going on, or anything like that?
So there was a little bit of stuff going on in the background. I didn't go to church, so there were a few times during my transition that I thought, I would really like to go to church, and then I would look for a church that's okay with me being transgender, and I guess I was aware enough to know this does not seem like a church. This doesn't seem right with the pride flags and all that. So I don't need it to be celebrated. I just need to be able to go there. And it was just tough to find one. So I gave up a little bit on trying to go to church, and then there was one year, I can't remember off the top of my head what year it was, but I started listening to a Bible in a Year podcast. It's a Catholic one done by Father Mike Schmitz. It's a popular one. I know that a lot of Protestants and Lutherans might even listen to it. I did, but I wasn't part of the Lutheran Church yet. So when I was listening to that podcast and listening to it every day, I would just kind of put it on while I was working. I worked maintenance, so I'm cleaning floors, listening to this podcast, listening to the Word of God. And about halfway through the year, I decided I need to get myself to confession, because I had decided I do need to detransition. I can't keep living like this, but what am I going to do? What steps am I going to take to even get to that point? Because it was just such a daunting task. I didn't know how to make sense of, like, what's the first step. So I went to confession and then went right back to living as a man. I didn't want to do it after that. So it was just went and then changed my mind, and then changed my mind again, and then changed my mind again, and eventually landed on, Katie, get your butt to church. Just go back, talk to somebody. And I did a Google search at that point. This was either 2022 or 2023. I did a Google search for very conservative churches, and I did that because I did not want anybody in the congregation to lie to me and say, oh, it's okay to be transgender. I was like, no, I'm going to go there. And I only have men's clothing. I still have a men's haircut because I refuse to let my hair grow. I still look like a boy. And I need to tell people I am not a boy and don't call me one. And they need to not call me one. So I landed on a Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod congregation in New Hampshire. And I went there a few weeks. And then I told the pastor, hey, can we chat? And I went to him. And he still, I think, will laugh about this. But I sat down in his office for an hour and a half, talking about everything under the sun, except my transgender identity. And then at the end of it, he asked me, so is there anything else you'd like to talk about? And he had no idea that I was a woman. I didn't tell him.
Huh.
And I said, yeah, I'm a woman. And I think I want to or I said, I'm transgender and I'm not sure I want to be. It was something like that. He still knows it. He has it memorized. Whatever I did at the end of that. And he just said, let's set up another meeting. So I met with him again a couple of weeks later, I think. But that was it for anything Christian going on in the background. That was really it.
I got to know. So I personally have a real bad pastor face at those moments. I know you're just supposed to just have a clean, even look. And usually most of the time I go, did he have a good pastor face at that moment, or did he respond in shock and awe and what?
No, he definitely had a good pastor face, and he was, I could ask him too, but he was very wise to just kind of go, okay, let's schedule another meeting. Because I think at that point he maybe was not prepared to talk about it. Just caught him off guard.
I'd be like, I need some resources for this. Wow.
I got to say, too, by the way, I think if you Google very conservative churches. At the top, LCMS will be a sponsored result.
So, it's interesting. You mentioned Father Mike Schmidt's Bible in a Year. I've been known to listen to his catechism in a year, and if you're anywhere near my bathroom while it's playing, and as I'm getting ready in the morning, you'll hear me go, yes, yes, no, no, yes, no. It's one of those things. Very thoughtful guy. I appreciate him a lot. I think he's sincerely wrong at times, but hey, that's why I'm not Roman Catholic, right? Anyway, so you were kind of, it's funny. God uses his word to draw you back in, and you end up at this Lutheran church. Were you already aware that your identity was really a baptized child of Christ, or was this just starting to dawn on you, or did your pastor really drive this home with you? How did this come into focus with you?
No, it just kind of hit me when I was looking for any reason to. I don't know. I don't necessarily want to say continue living, because I wasn't suicidal in the same sense that some people are in the way that you think about stereotypically. But basically, I was looking for just any reason to, I guess you could say any reason to keep going. That might be the most accurate way to say it. And kind of, who am I? What am I supposed to do at this point? I don't want to keep going through with the transition, but if I detransition, I have to admit to everybody that the biggest decision I've ever made in my life, I got it all wrong. But trust me, you can still trust me again for more decisions. That was just so hard. And I remember it because one night it was just a really rough night. I couldn't sleep. I was up, I was crying, and it just hit me. I don't have to call myself a man or a woman or a daughter or a son or any of that stuff. I am a child of God. And then I went, well, I'm a baptized child of God. So if I have my baptism, what more do I need? Like, I can work with this. This is great. And it just really hit me out of nowhere. But obviously, going to my pastor and going through the catechism together, that solidified it. But I already knew. I even went to him and I said, listen, I'm okay with being Lutheran. I was raised in the Roman Catholic Church. And I said, I'm okay with being Lutheran, but my baptism's valid and you don't get to rebaptize me. And of course he said I would never do that.
Yeah, rebaptism is not even a word. It's like, a what? What? No. Man, how great that is too. And I know I've ended up preaching on this a couple of times about our baptismal identity, about, who is the one who truly gets to determine who we really are in our very essence, our very core. And that, of course, is Jesus. And he names us what we are. And everything else is just kind of additional to that. And I lament so much that so many people end up falling into this trap that somehow their bodies determine what they are, or their own inner lives determine what they want to be or are, and that type of thing. And they can't see themselves through God's eyes when he says, no, you are mine. And I wish that more people could see that like you do.
I wish that too.
So with just a couple of minutes left, I'd like to ask you, as a pastor dealing with young people on a regular basis, how do we approach this in the church best? There's a law and gospel approach. Sometimes, as Luther says, we have to call a thing what it is, and sin is sin, and grace is grace, and there's always forgiveness for sin. But how do we call this out as a sin without making people feel personally condemned? Is there a way that you've seen?
Well, it'll probably just
really
depend.
I want to add to that question just a little bit, spin on that question if I can, because in particular, way back when in the circle conversation, when you said safe spaces, I do believe I wish the church could be a truly safe space for people, to where they would be completely comfortable being here and knowing that they are not going to be attacked or hated or vilified, but rather they will be loved, but loved with the true love. And so can you is that good or right, or should I even not use the word safe spaces and then everything else Craig said?
I mean, you can use what words you want to use if you think that it's going to have a certain meaning attached that you don't want it to mean, then I wouldn't use it. I mean, that's all I would say on that. So if you want to say safe space, I don't see a problem with that. It's like if you ask me, should I use the preferred pronouns of a trans-identified person, I would say, well, no, because now you're lying. But if you just want to call church a safe place because that's what it is, then yes, I would say go for it. But if people start thinking that means you affirm certain things that you don't affirm, then I would just stop using it. That's how I see the use of certain terms, certain words. But I think as a church and as pastors, what my pastor, see, I always talk about my pastor back in New Hampshire, a very, very, very wise man. He told me that sometimes the best way to talk about things is to talk about the way God has created it, and then people can see what happens when you deviate from that. So instead of hammering, God created male and female, you just kind of talk about God's creation, and this is true, but you don't have to yell it at people. And they might start to see when we don't follow that, things actually go very badly for us. And it gives it a better motivation than just dropping truth bombs on them. So that is something that he's told me.
You're suggesting we just preach biblical truth, declare biblical truth, and allow people to see their own reflection in light of that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think you just preach the word of God and let it do what it does. But also, if we're going to speak specifically to the issue, especially with young people, they go to school, like we were talking about, schools, especially public schools, some of them are just insane. They have the pride flags everywhere. I think it is important, whether it's in Bible study or if your congregation's ready for it and you mention it on Sunday. I don't know. I'm not going to say what to do as a pastor because I'm not a pastor. I never will be. But if it's something that you need to tackle with your congregation, it's perfectly appropriate to tackle it in Bible studies, in adult Sunday schools. My home church has done, it's a very big church. We have a lot of adults show up on Sunday for Bible school, for Bible study and adult Sunday school. So sometimes they will read a book. CPH puts out great books on things, and they will go through it and they'll talk about the theology and all this stuff on whatever topic they're reading about. Sometimes that's an appropriate way to handle it, where you're thinking, let's talk about sexual sin, and we'll be able to kind of dive into all these things and how to handle it. But it's important to just be honest and to not give in. Because if a person comes to you and says, if a man comes to you and says, I want you to call me Sally and call me she, well, you can't do that out of love and respect for that person. He's very, very confused, but he's not Sally and he's not a she. So you do have to be truthful, and that is going to hurt some people, but that does not mean that you lie just to spare their feelings. Their feelings are what's wrong. The truth is not what's wrong.
Well, we're pretty much out of time. Troy, any last thoughts before we
I was just going to chime in on that. I think with that, especially our baptismal identity, the name we are given in our birth is the name we're baptized with, and I know that God knew you and continues to know you as Katie, and always has been. And I think our given name, our birth name, is also part of baptismal identity. So I'm just kind of interested to hear you say that. I had one more hot question, if I can. I know you're trying to get off the air here, Craig, but can I?
Well, yeah. I just need to get Katie back to work before she gets into trouble. That's all.
Indeed. Okay. Well, we probably should do that. But
by the way, I need to call out Pastor David Jewell. Don't you dare let her get into trouble, Dave. There you go.
Okay.
There. Now you're safe. You're safe, Katie. You're good to go.
Thank you.
Yeah. That is not her pastor back in New Hampshire.
No, that's the church where they are right now. Yeah.
Yes. Although, yeah. Anyway, as you detransition, so you probably had a lot of support from the trans community as you transitioned. As you detransitioned,
oh boy,
what did that? Did you receive a lot of support? Did people say, "Okay, we understand. That's how you feel about your body now, and we're going to support you in that"? Or did you have to find a new supportive community?
I had to find an entirely new community, but I wasn't going to go back to the trans community for help anyway because they're the ones who got me into the mess. And they will sometimes help detransitioners if you agree, like, oh, yeah, you were trans and that's valid. And now you're just seeing yourself in a different way. And so you're still seeking your truth. And that was just not the case with me. And I was not going to go back to them. I actually did. I went back to the gender clinic because I was just so confused. And I said, what do I do from here? But there did come a point that I just thought I can't rely on them. So I had to figure out how to change my name back legally because they had helped me with that before. They'd given me the proper forms to fill out to change my social security card, change my name, change my license, even change my birth certificate. I could do all that within a year, but then detransitioning, I just got my birth certificate fixed last year. So I was in a mess. I was all tangled up in paperwork for years detransitioning, but not transitioning the first time. That was easy peasy lemon squeezy.
So it goes one way.
Oh yeah, it only goes one way.
Amazing.
Oh boy. Oh, hey, wow. Thanks so much for being on the show, telling your story. Man, good stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
By the way, if you happen to be in the Minnesota North District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we're having our district youth gathering here in Wilmer in April, and Katie's one of our key speakers that we're really looking forward to having you, Katie, and I look forward to meeting you in person and sharing a little time with you and your husband. I hear he's going to come also. And
yes, he is.
It'd be really great to spend some time with you both. And thank you for your honesty, Katie, for your being brave and just talking about all this stuff so openly. Go find Katie Coblintz on YouTube. She's been on Lila Rose and other places. Amazing story and in much greater depth than we were able to get into today. But God bless you, Katie, and keep up the good work. And I hope you and your husband have a wonderful rest of his vicarage. And we'll look forward to being in touch with you even further.
Thank you so much.
We're pretty much out of time. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you in his grace. We'll see you.